Good afternoon, and welcome to our presentation on the Research Experience Fellowship, hereafter mostly referred to as REF. My name is Jerry McMillan. I'm a Europe advisor, and for the next half hour, 45 minutes, we're going to talk about the Research Experience Fellowship, what it is, what you need to do to be eligible, how to apply, all the stuff you need, and then have plenty of times for questions afterwards. So to start, the Research Experience Fellowship is an opportunity for students, meaning you, who are engaged in UCI faculty-mentored undergraduate research projects and/or creative activities to apply for recognition and possible funding for your project. It covers projects that are going for up to the next calendar year. And as a note, the funding that you can request and possibly receive is intended to reimburse you for project-related expenses. It has to be designated for something specifically related to your research. It's not a check, just a check we hand to you, and I'll talk a little bit more of that as we go along. But let's start at a basic level. What do you get if you apply to this thing and you get it? First of all, you become a Europe Fellow, which I notice nobody screaming or jumping up for joy. So let me tell you what being a Europe Fellow means. First of all, you have gained recognition for your project. This is one of those things you put on your resume. Say, Europe Fellow. What's that? I got recognized by an organization on campus for having valid, important, significant research. You're able to point to that as an accomplishment that you received for being here at UCI. You also have the potential for funding. And the reason I keep saying potential, and I'll talk specific numbers in a little bit, is the reality is we don't have the funding we would like, which means we can't give you as much money as we would like to as well. This comes up with some limits, but that I'll get to again in a minute. But what it really means is we want you to apply regardless of whether you expect funding or not, simply for the recognition and the opportunities you get to showcase your project. We have our symposium, which is coming up in May. If you receive funding or recognition from the Research Experience Fellowship, meaning you become a Europe Fellow, we require you to present at the symposium. As a minor detail, if you are required to present at the symposium, you still need to apply to present at the symposium rather than just assuming, well, they know I'm here, so I'm just going to go. You have to go through the process anyway. We just need to make sure you're doing it. If you do not become a Europe Fellow, we still encourage you to present at the symposium, but you don't have to. But being a Europe Fellow means you are part of the research culture officially at UCI. You've received recognition, you've possibly received funding, and we will celebrate your great success by giving you the opportunities to present. So, who can apply for this? First of all, you need to be a continuing UCI undergraduate student between now and at least winter quarter in 2025. In other words, you need not to graduate this December. If you're continuing as an undergrad beyond that, you are absolutely eligible for this one. You need to be doing a project under a UCI faculty mentor. A lot of people ask, okay, but my mentor's a grad student. Is that okay? And the answer is kind of yes. Because if you're working in a lab, you're working under a grad student, that's great. And you still need a faculty mentor signature. So who's the faculty advising the grad student? They need to be part of this process, even though they can then designate the grad student as your official advisor for the project. But every project applying for this program needs to have a UCI faculty mentor somewhere in that chain. We require you to be in good academic standing. What that means is GPA 2.0 or better. And we have a couple of limitations, and I'll flesh this out a little bit more as we go along, but we do have a limitation that no student may request funding for more than one individual project. And you may also apply for one or more group projects in addition to the individual project. But the one limitation is you may not request funding for more than one individual, meaning you're the only undergraduate on it, project. And the project must have specific aims. And by specific aims, what we really mean is because you can apply for funding recognition for a project going through this year, you need to have expected to accomplish something within that time. And even if you're part of a much larger project that has long-term goals, what's the part of the project you're working on now? What do you hope to accomplish in that time? You have to have something tangible that you're working towards to request funding or recognition through this program. And as I mentioned, if you receive funding or recognition and you are still a student at the time, we require you to apply for and present at the symposium. If you receive funding or recognition and are not a continuing student still in May, we'll invite you to come back and present anyway. We just can't make you do it because you're gone. So, moving on. To apply for the Research Experience Fellowship, you go to our website, hover on opportunities. The top thing you will see is recognition and funding. Click that. The first thing you get to is the Research Experience Fellowship. You need to have three things for this, three specific documents for this application. You need a proposal. You need a personal statement, and you need a faculty agreement form. Talk about each of those as we go along, but you need to have prepared all three of those documents in advance before you complete your application. In addition, the application form will ask things like name, email, all that sort of stuff you're used to putting into any application you do, but these are the three documents you need to prepare. And just as a note, when you get into the application system, you can start typing in information, submitting things, selecting things. There will be a button at the bottom, two buttons at the bottom. One of them says Save as Draft. If you save as draft, the next time you come back to your application, everything you've done so far will still be there. The important thing to note is the other button at the bottom says Submit Application. And it is important that you do not click this button until your application is absolutely the way you want it to be. Because once you submit your application, you may make no further changes to it. So we recommend that you save as draft early, often, as many times as you want, but make sure everything is perfect to the best of your abilities before you actually submit it. Just because, as I say, once you've done that, it's done. That's what we're going with. And as a note, the submission deadline is Friday, November 8th, 11:59 p.m. And just to note, this is a very popular program. Students being as you are, a lot of people like to submit their applications at 11:57 on Friday, November 8th. And the platform on which our application system runs can sometimes get overloaded and you're just looking at a little circle going round and round and round and round for hours, which may mean you don't get your application in on time. So my very strong recommendation is prepare early. Submit by 6 or 7 that evening so that you're not one of the ones facing that little circle going round and round and round and giving us panicky phone calls the next day or Monday. So just word to the wise, apply early, please. So, as I mentioned, 3 documents you have to submit. First one's a proposal. What's a proposal? A proposal is basically a description of your project. The purpose of the proposal is to justify the reward of recognition and/or funding for your project. Just as a note, when you are applying for the Research Experience Fellowship, in many ways you're actually applying on behalf of the project rather than on behalf of yourselves. We are awarding the project. We have another program in the summer Undergraduate Research Fellowship, which awards students directly. We give you a stipend directly to a student. If there are multiple students working on a project, each one applies individually. For this one, you're applying for the project. So whether it's one of you, whether it's a group of undergrads all working on the same project, you're applying just for recognition or funding for that project. The proposal is the document that justifies your request. There are a number of elements to a project. First one, thesis, purpose, objective, or approach. And one thing to note, a lot of fields of study have very rigorous traditional layouts and organizations for proposals. You'll recognize most of these as being headings you would have seen in proposals. These are absolutely descriptions of what we need in the project. This is absolutely not a required format or organization or even headings. This is just information that needs to be there. How you organize it, how you lay it out, how you write it, should be how you think you can best make the case that your project is worthy. But what does the proposal need? It needs to tell us why the project is significant. Why does it matter? What's the effect it's going to have on the body of knowledge in your field? And what are your goals? As I mentioned, you need to have a tangible goal for your project. What are they? What do you hope to accomplish by the end? Lay out the responsibility of all of the undergraduate researchers involved in the project. If it's an individual project, that's just you. If there are multiple students involved, discuss what each one's going to be doing. If everybody's doing exactly the same thing, you can say that, but make sure every name associated with the project also has a role applied to it in the proposal. And also, if you're working in a lab or assisting on a mentor's project, how does your role differ from theirs? One of the things our reviewers definitely look for in evaluating these proposals is to see that students are doing independent work. Not just sitting down with their faculty mentor who says, do that, oh, type that some more. What are you doing that's different? What are you doing that's unique to your part in this project? Make that clear in the proposal. As I mentioned, one of the you can request funding. The funding is to reimburse project-related materials, supplies, and expenses. So, since you're asking for funding, what funding are you asking for? If you're submitting an individual project, you can request up to $1,000. If you're submitting a proposal for a group project, you may request up to $2,500. With the absolute caveat, you'll get less. Again, I wish it weren't the case, but that's the way it is. Average awards these days have been running from about $250 to $400 for individual projects and about $800 to $1,000 for group projects. But include a budget in your proposal. Tell us what you need to tell us what you're asking for funding to cover. And I will be talking a little bit more about our guidelines, the document you can download, which has a really thorough discussion of the budget. including things, what can I ask for? What can I not ask for? Things students a lot ask for. For one thing, you're going to have to present at the symposium. It costs money to print a poster. Ask for funding to print the poster. Request funding for photocopying. Request funding, I've seen requests for lab animals, for library funds, for gas to drive to interviews, all sorts of things. The things you cannot request are funding for major hardware purchases. You cannot ask for funding for large-scale travel. If you're going to present at a conference somewhere else, we won't cover your airfare under this program, although we do have another program that does cover that sort of expense as well. And the other thing in terms of requesting funding is we very strongly ask that you do not ask us to cover funding for things you can already get as students. Through the resources in the library, through all of the software you have access to, are there things you need for your project that you can already get? Please don't ask us to fund that, because that's funding somebody else doesn't get. Moving on to the timeline. How do you hope to do this? When do you hope to do it? What are the steps going to be like? What are you doing this week, next week? All of this. How do you plan to move through this project? And then the last thing we need in a proposal is references. Whose work are you building off of to do what you're doing? Include them. That way our reviewers know what your project is building on, so that they can make sure that it really is grounded in something significant and important. And just as a note, if you are submitting a group project or a proposal for a group project, please include all undergrads in the writing of the proposal. Make sure everybody's a part of that process. That way everybody both has input, but everybody can double check that, well, what you list as their role is what they really want to be doing or expect that they're going to be doing. So make sure everybody's a part of this process. I mentioned the timeline briefly. Just most timelines are going to be weekly. If there's something really general that's going on for a quarter, okay. But be as detailed as you can at this point, knowing absolutely that things will change by the time you actually get there. But outline the specific process. What are the milestones you need to pass to keep your project moving? And then list goals. What do you hope to be doing? Where do you hope to be by the end of this week? It's a way of keeping yourselves on track, and also, again, giving our reviewers a chance to see, okay, this is a realistic plan. They can do this. So that's the proposal. What should it look like? First of all, typically 3 to 5 pages. And when I say typically, that just means most of them tend to be that way. We have absolutely no requirement on page count. The proposal should be exactly as long as it is required to be, in a way that is both concise and complete. Include all the information you need and nothing else. Make sure it's tightly written, no redundancy, nothing that doesn't need to be there. I've seen a number of students talking to me about proposals they've written, look at them. Usually if somebody comes in with this is 9 pages, is that too long? I look at it and, well, if you cut this, trim this, write this a little better, you're down to 7 pages. So make sure you edit it well, proofread it, make sure it's clean, and that everything in it is important. A little bit more on resources for that in a bit. And refer to our Research Experience Fellowship Application Guide. Downloadable from our website, pages 7 to 10, talk about proposal formatting and the proposal in general. Our guide has a lot of great information, and it's something you can refer to at any point. So I'm not going to cover exactly what's in it at this point, other than to say, download it, refer to it often. That's the proposal. Other than the caveat, please make sure you talk to your faculty mentor about this, because foreshadowing, we're going to ask them to sign off on your proposal. Make sure they like it before you ask for that signature. Moving on to the second document you need, the personal statement. So if you'll recall, the proposal is describing the worthiness of this project to receive recognition or funding. The purpose of the personal statement is to give our reviewers an idea of why this matters to you. What is your role in this? Why is this important? So it describes your relationship to the project. It describes your motivation for the research. How did you get involved in this? Benefits and goals. How will doing this project, how will getting this recognition and funding get you closer to reaching whatever academic, career, and personal goals you have? What sort of background do you have that's relevant to this research? And then for me, probably the most important thing, why does this matter to you? Why is this important to you? One of the great things about all of the projects that all of you are doing is this personal relationship you have with it. How are you growing through this? What do you hope to get out of it? That's the sense we want to get out of the personal statement. Who are you? How are you related to this project? Personal statements tend to be 1 to 2 pages. As I mentioned, complete, concise. Beyond that, whatever you feel is appropriate and necessary. And again, information in our application guide. If you are submitting a for a group project, every student on that group project needs to prepare a personal statement. Then all of the personal statements need to be combined into one single document with individual student names above each section. And then that is the one personal statement document you submit with your application. So a couple of differences. Proposal, you submit one, it's the same proposal for everybody involved in the project. Personal statement, everybody prepares their own, but again, combined into a single document that is then submitted. Of course, if you're doing an individual project, no problem. It's the same for both. The third document you need is the faculty mentor agreement form. Basically, what this does is it formalizes the role of your faculty mentor with your project. As I mentioned at the beginning, we require you to have a faculty mentor associated with your project. Even if you're working directly under a grad student, a postdoc, somebody else involved in the research, you must have a faculty mentor for the purposes of your project, for your application, and for this document. One of the things they will indicate on this document is that they have reviewed your proposal and approve of it. So make sure they review your proposal and approve of it. So a couple of things on doing this document. First of all, we recommend you download this document. It's available on the application form right now. Warn your faculty mentor it's coming. Send it to them. Then meet with them to go over your proposal. Make any changes they ask for. They will then sign the faculty mentor agreement form. As I mentioned, there is a spot on this form for them to designate a secondary mentor for your project. So if you're working under a grad student, this is where that person is indicated. They fill out this form, they return it to you, and then you submit it as part of your application. So the important thing about this is sometimes it's hard to get meetings with faculty. Let them know now that this is coming. Set up an appointment down the road for both to meet to talk about your proposal, but also tell them, I need this document done by November 8th so I can submit it. Give them that expectation. Give them that requirement so they know it's coming, so that when you get to that point, they're not just looking at you saying, I don't know, I don't have time for this. Make sure they know it's coming. So, the one other thing to think about in your application process is the research you are doing must apply with UCI's responsible conduct of research rules, which can be either IRB if you're doing research with human subjects, or the IACUC if you're working with animal subjects. And it is important to review with your faculty mentor whether your project requires approval from either of these bodies. Couple of notes on this. First of all, IACUC, if you're doing animal subjects research, your faculty mentor probably has a agreement already. They can probably add you to that pre-existing protocol without a whole lot of problem. If you're doing human subjects research, that may be possible for an IRB protocol as well. But for IRB, there's also a special designation called IRB exempt, which is designed specifically for undergraduate-led projects that apply minimal to no risk to its subjects. And there is a form you can fill out, linked to in our guide and on our website, that will help you decide if you are exempt. If you are exempt, all you have to do is complete this form, submit it, and you have just received IRB approval for your project. If you aren't eligible for exempt, it can be a much lengthier process. So my recommendation is first go to that document, check it out, see if you're eligible for it. If you are, it's relatively easy. The important thing to think about if you require IRB or IACUC approval is you will not be able to begin that research until you receive that approval. So whether you are applying for the Research Experience Fellowship or not, if you need that approval, get moving on it now, because you can't do much until you have it. For our application, however, for the application, we do not require you to have IRB or IACUC approval. There's a question on the form for each of these. Are you doing human subjects research? Yes, and I have IRB approval. I know I need IRB approval, and I've applied. My faculty mentor and I have looked at IRB approval. We'll get to it. You have options on our application form. You don't need the approval before applying for our program. But you do need that approval before you can begin your research. So, as I mentioned, our submission deadline, November 8, 11:59. Please do it earlier. The proposals will go into review at that point, and the review will continue until sometime, but hopefully before the end of the school year, we will announce who receives recognition and funding. Just as a note, as you're applying for this, you may apply for either recognition or recognition and funding. If you apply for recognition, you would receive recognition. If you apply for funding, ideally you would receive funding and recognition. In some cases, depending on what our reviewers come up with, you might receive recognition only. So just understand that if you apply for funding, it's possible you might not get it, although our policy has always been to try to fund as many students as possible, even if that means the average award is lower in that case. But we announce the results, hopefully by finals week. And then If you do receive funding, the funds you receive will be transferred to your faculty mentor's department, to an accounting person there. You then will need to contact that accounting person. It'll be in the email announcing the award. And whenever you spend anything that's covered by the award, you contact them, they reimburse you for it. So funds are transferred to the department, and then you need to work with the department to get access to those funds. That will happen at the beginning of winter quarter. Conduct your research for the next year, and then, as I said, in May, we have our symposium. Registration will go at late in winter quarter. In May, you can present, show us everything amazing you have done. And again, refer to our guide. It's cool. It's got a lot of stuff in it. It will answer most of the questions you have. If you still have questions, you are absolutely welcome to contact the UROP office, email us, drop by, talk to Brennan at the front desk. If you have specific questions, you can make an appointment with me or one of our other staff advisors. We also have the third bullet there, proposal writing walk-in hours. We have a series of hours next week that we are combining with the Writing Center. It'll be in this room. You can bring a copy of your proposal, sit down with a Writing Center peer advisor, go through your proposal, take whatever suggestions they have. So a chance to have an extra pair of eyes on your proposal, a chance to ask UROP people questions about the process, a chance to get through it all better. The other thing before we stop for questions is this QR on the right goes to a short survey. We do a lot of these sorts of presentations every year, and the only way we know if we're doing them well is if you tell us. So we ask that you fill out the survey. If there is something you wish we'd included in this, tell us. Because the only way we can make it better is if we know what we're missing. And with that, I will thank you for coming. I will wish you success in your research and in your application process. And any questions? Yeah. Does a lead scientist count as a faculty mentor? Our definition of faculty member is a member of the academic senate, which means almost certainly not. But again, they could be designated as your active mentor, whatever I can't remember the exact term on the faculty mentor agreement form, but you do need to have your PI sign off on that form. And after that, absolutely work with your lab director. Yep. Other questions? And if you have questions as you're packing up, I will stick around for as long as you want to come up and talk with me. But beyond that, thanks for coming and good luck with this process.